Right, so in this question, number 10, we start by completing the square. So question says, right, y equals x squared minus 4 plus 1 in the form y equals x minus a number all squared plus b. A and b are integers to be determined. That just basically means that a and b are whole numbers, and you've got to work out what they are. So it's aiming to help you because it's telling you that these will be whole numbers when if you've completed the square correctly with this. So when I'm completing the square, I write y as something squared subtract a number, or replace x squared minus 4x with something squared subtract a number. Then I'm going to have a plus 1 at the end. So what goes in the bracket? Well, it's an equation in terms of x. I'm going to write an x there. And then I divide the term in x, the coefficient of x, by 2. And write my answer here, so I get minus 2. So it's y equals x minus 2 all squared. And then I subtract, I always subtract the square of what's written here. So I subtract negative 2 all squared, so I subtract 4. So I've got x minus 2 all squared minus 4 add 1, which is x minus 2 all squared minus 3. So I can see that A is 2 and B is minus 3. Okay, now it says write down the coordinates of the vertex point of the graph of y equals x squared minus 4x plus 1. So y equals x squared minus 4x plus 1 is the same as the equation in part A. So presumably I can use part A to help me with B. Coordinates of the vertex point. The vertex point in this graph is the lowest point on the graph. Well, the lowest value that y equals x squared minus 4x plus 1 can be deduced from the completed square form, because in completed square form we can see that y is equal to something squared minus 3. Any number squared is positive or 0. If it's positive, a positive number minus 3 is obviously going to be a bigger amount than 0 minus 3. So the smallest value you can have is when when y is minus 3, and the minimum point when y is minus 3 occurs when x equals 2, when this is 0. So the vertex point is also our minimum point in the graph. The lowest point occurs when x is 2. When x is 2, I get 0 squared minus 3. So when x is 2 and y equals minus 3, so we get 2 comma minus 3 is our answer. Now, the y-intercept of the graph is obviously where the graph crosses the y-axis, and that occurs when the x-coordinate is 0. So if I make x equals 0 here and here, y equals 0 squared, take away 4 times 0, that's 0, plus 1. So y equals 1 as the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is 1, so crosses the y-axis at 0, 1. And now for part D, we want the coordinates of the points where the graph crosses the x-axis. Giving my values correct to 1 decimal place. So values correct to 1 decimal place suggests that whatever we do is going to involve some rounding. So where does the graph cross the x-axis? Well, the graph crosses the x-axis where the y-coordinate is 0. So when y-coordinate is 0, so in other words we have x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. All right, where it crosses the x-axis. Now we want to solve this equation, and obviously the easiest way to do it is to use a result that we've found earlier. We use the completed square form. X squared minus 4x plus 1 is the same as x minus 2 all squared take 3. So x squared minus 4x plus 1 equals 0. Now what I do is I add 3 to both sides, so I get x minus 2 all squared equals 3. And then finally, well, nearly finally, I want to get what x minus 2 is by finding the square root of both sides. So the square root of 3 is plus or minus the square root of 3. And so x is, add 2 to both sides, x is 2 plus or minus root 3. Using my calculator, that comes to 3.7 to 1 decimal place, or 0.3 to 1 decimal place, and that's part D done. Now finally I've got to put all this information together to sketch my graph. So it might be worth doing a rough sketch first just to get an idea of what's going on. I know it's a U-shaped graph because it's a positive x squared term. It goes through the point 0, 1 on the y-axis. Alright, so it goes through 0, 1. It goes through 0.3 on the x-axis and 3.7 just to work into one decimal place. It's going to go through 0.3 and it's going to go through about 3.7. So it's coming down like this. It's going to come up with 3.7. I know that the lowest value, the vertex point, is y equals -3, so down here is -3. And I know that that occurs when x is 2. Now this is quite a scruffy effort, this graph, so I would, having done my rough sketch, I would have drawn a neater version that looks a little bit, well, it looks a little bit better. So you should end up with something a little bit like what I drew earlier. I used a graph plotter for this because it's quite difficult to get a neat result, but this is too untidy to do a decent sketch, and this graph shows the key features that we want, which is where the graph crosses the y-axis, so it needs to have a 1 there, goes through 1.3 and 3.7 to one decimal place, minimum point at 2, -3.